Did you know there is music theory in the Bible? I'm not making this up, this is 100% real. Check this out. Psalms chapter 6 opens up like this. For the director of music with the stringed instrument according to Shimon. What? What is a Shimon?
What is a shimon?
Were to play the lyres according to the Alamoth. And 6 more Hebrew names were to play the harps directing according to Sheminith. This is huge.
Hello, is this the University of Arkansas? Yeah, hey guys, have you seen Titus's video? That's like a huge research hole. Isn't somebody doing something about that? What do you mean nobody cares? I care and I'm a student here. What do you mean I can research it myself if I'm a student here? I can do that? So, as you saw, Titus made a video about a research hole in some music theory terms in the Bible. And I want to give it a solid academic try to fill this research hole. I'm going to be helped by my friend Titus himself, and I'm also going to be helped by my professor, Dr. Sophie Brady. I really liked Titus's video. It's a great presentation. He did his research, but I didn't agree with his conclusions. And I think there's still a lot to uncover here with this sort of music theory mystery in the Psalms. Fortunately, I happen to be a student at a public university, which affords me the opportunity to conduct my own research and to investigate this. I have the unique opportunity to dedicate some actual scholarly research to uncovering these mysteries. Now, we are only just embarking on our journey towards uncovering these strange musical terms. And the most important first step to solving any problem is to identify the problem. In this video, we will be problem framing, which is the critical first step to solving any problem. Before we can tackle the issue, we need to clearly identify the problems and what we hope to accomplish by solving them. So in Titus's video, he pointed out that most of these terms have a pretty solid definition of like what the words literally mean translated. The issue is we don't know what those words meant in a musical context. So our first goal with this project would be to define these terms. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but like, why does it even matter to define a few music words? I mean, so what if Alamoth means low octave? Whoop-de-doo, who cares, bro?
So, yeah, defining a few music theory terms is cool, but it doesn't seem really impactful. So with this project, we want to take it one step further. Hip.
It's hip to be square.
In the musical world, hip is a historically informed performance. It can take many different forms, but ultimately the goal of hip is always to play the music as close as we can to how it would have sounded when it was originally written. In a practical sense, this goal is pretty much impossible. We're never going to get it 100% exactly the way it sounded when it was written, but trying to get as close as we can usually teach us a lot about the music and the people who wrote and performed it. So if we look at the Psalms from this perspective of historically informed performance, by taking this approach, we not only want to define what these terms mean, we also want to know what the instructions as a whole mean to the musicians performing the music. We need to interpret the instruments they're talking about, what tuning systems they may be referring to in these headings. Now, you may be asking, surely people have already tried to do this, right? Yeah, people have tried to do it. One example we found was from the San Antonio Vocal Arts Ensemble. They have some good recordings of some biblical songs, and some of them have some important characteristics that are very likely historically accurate. The issue is they adapt a lot of things. For example, they use a modern trumpet in one of their recordings, trying to emulate the sound of a shofar, rather than just using a shofar or whatever other brass instrument that would have been used at the time. So what they're doing is great, but we want to get to a more specific interpretation of the musical instructions of the Psalms.
Yeah, but like, what even were the Psalms, bro? And in what historical context were they originally written and performed?
Well, the earliest Jewish traditional songs began as battle songs that the women would sing to the men when they returned home from battle. They had an interesting social expectation that the women would play and sing and dance around their men in order to celebrate their victories at war.
Honey, I'm home. Is your sonata ready?
Now, the earliest liturgical psalms were meant to accompany sacrifices in the temples. Now, a very large portion of the psalms were attributed to King David, but some scholars suggest that there may have been multiple authors, or David could have had outside influence or help. And this brings us to our first finding, our first observation that we're going to be investigating. Contrafactum. What is contrafactum? Well, many songs get their melody from a pre-existing song. A couple clear examples are some American Patriot songs. The national anthem was a contrafactum. My Country 'Tis of Thee. These songs were adaptations of existing melodies. Sam Mirelman, in his 2008 article, made a very important observation. The people who wrote the Psalms very likely used contrafactum at one point or another. They very likely adapted existing musical material, adapting melodies from surrounding cultures or from the Egyptian cultures that they left. And we can figure out how these original songs were played. That gives us a really good indication as to what the instructions mean in the Psalms. Therefore, as a part of our research, we're also going to be learning about the neighboring cultures' music theory. Now, before we get any further, there's a very important problem we need to talk about, and that is the ancient Jews didn't write things down very much. They recorded their history and their music orally. They just told it to the next generation, and that's how they maintain these songs and their stories. So unfortunately what this means is the time at which the Psalms were written, like actually originally written and performed, could have been 1,000 years before it was ever put pen to paper. So the unfortunate problem this means for us is it means the instructions at the beginning of the Psalms very likely could have been added much, much later. So does this mean the terms are irrelevant for us for a historically informed performance? Well, no, because there is an interesting relationship here. The people who wrote it down were very likely writing those instructions for other people performing the music. If the notes were indeed from one musician to another for instructions to play the music, then they were doing the same thing we are. They're trying to perform the music as accurately as they could to the original writers, and that's exactly what we're doing. Therefore, it shouldn't actually make much difference to us if they were added later or were originally in the Psalms, because either way, they both contribute to a more historically accurate performance. Now, some of you may notice I used an assumption there that these were written from musicians to other musicians. That may not be the case. In Titus's video, one of the main things I disagreed with was the fact that he suggested that these terms could be really tailored towards the text. This is an important question that we're going to try to answer with this research. Do the instructions mean anything in regards to the text, or is it purely for the musicians? Another important point that Titus brought up in his video was bias. And we need to be aware of our bias, and we need to fight our bias while conducting this research. One of the things he pointed out is we have a very Eurocentric view of this ancient music theory. We need to look at their music theory as they would have understood it, not from our own modern understanding of music theory. But is our modern understanding of music theory all that different from theirs? Well, this is a question we hope to answer while conducting this research. In order to correctly interpret the musical definitions and the musical instructions of the Psalms, we need to understand them in the context of the music theory at the time. So if their music theory is very similar to ours, it's not a huge deal. But if it's very different, that's something we need to know. From our very limited research so far, it seems to indicate that their music theory wasn't much different from our modern understanding as far as intervals go and tuning systems go.
Yo, sorry, I fell asleep, bro. What was this video about again?
So ultimately, we want to perform, or have the ability to perform, a psalm or a couple of psalms as historically accurate as we possibly can. In order to do so, we need to understand who wrote the instructions at the beginning of some of these psalms, who they're written to, if they have anything to do with the text or if they're just for the music, and we need to define the mystery terms that Titus found in his video. Titus is going to tell us specifically which terms we would like to define. Yeah, so no, actually Titus will not be joining us because he's at the hospital with his newborn child or something like that. But I do have Titus's cat, so maybe he can fill in for Titus. What do you say, buddy? Gonna fill in for Titus? Yeah, so no, actually, Titus's cat can't be here either. So, filling in for Titus's cat, filling in for Titus is going to be my cat. Come here, buddy. Gustav.
The terms we hope to identify are as follows: Sheminith, Alameth, and Gittith.
Good boy. You did good. Good job. Gustav here says goodbye, and we can't wait to see you in the next video, where hopefully we've actually learned something. Hey, buddy. Hey.